they are from Mumbai, and there's immediately an overreaction, and we don't contextualize what is going on in the world as a whole. And that, I think, can be dangerous. I mean, there have been reports now by William Dalrymple and others in the British press describing an atrocity which took place in a Kashmiri hospital after a peaceful demonstration. When demonstrators were taken into a hospital, the Indian security burst in, threw doctors aside, dragged patients out, insulted nurses, and behaved like colonizing armies do. And this doesn't go down well either in Kashmir or the rest of India. So one has to sort of keep contextualizing what the situation in India is. It's not a country which has been at peace with itself, as my other two colleagues have already said. There have been terrorist attacks, there is turbulence in the Indian countryside, there are growing disparities of wealth. This nonsense that the neoliberal system was working has been exposed for the farce it is. So one has to see that, too, in discussing what is going on and not get over-concentrated on this atrocity, appalling though it is.
Talking about how high the stakes are, just going back to October 9th, President Bush signing legislation to lift a 3-decade ban on nuclear trade with India, the deal allowing India to expand its nuclear power industry without requiring it to sign on to the non-proliferation treaty, as other countries have to. Critics saying that the deal encourages nuclear production worldwide because it effectively rewards India for developing nukes outside the treaty. Then you also have the news that we had in August, U.S. saying that Pakistani ISI, the intelligence service of Pakistan, linked to the deadly Kabul bombing. A U.S. intelligence agency is accusing Pakistan's powerful spy service of helping plan last month's deadly bombing at the Indian embassy in Afghanistan, which killed 54 people. The conclusion based partly on intercepted communications between officers from Pakistan's ISI and the militants who carried out the attack in Kabul. Your response, Tariq Ali?
Well, I think that there is very little doubt that the bombing of the Indian embassy in Kabul was carried out with the collusion of rogue elements within the ISI stationed in the tribal areas of Pakistan. I think that privately the Pakistani government and military have admitted this to the United States, saying it was a decision taken by a single rogue officer who has been disciplined and dealt with, and that it will not be repeated again. So there's, I think, very little doubt of the fact that the bombing of the Indian embassy, which was always a mystery why the Afghans in particular would bomb it, I think that was an action approved by the Pakistani ISI, no doubt about that. But from that, Amy, it would be wrong to conclude that this too was that, because the ISI has been brought, especially since the Kabul bombing, but even before that, they've been cleaning it out, and it is under the strict control of the military top brass now in Pakistan. And I'm therefore dubious about rogue elements anymore, because if the ISI does something like the Mumbai things, it would have to be a decision from the military tops, and I just don't believe that they did it.
I want to bring a fourth guest into this conversation, Teesta Setalvad. She's an award-winning activist, journalist from Mumbai, co-editor of the magazine Communalism Combat. She heads the Mumbai-based NGO called Citizens for Peace and Justice. We're talking to her in Delhi, but she was in Mumbai when the attacks took place. Teesta, start off by describing the scene, how you came to understand what was happening in Mumbai, Bombay.
Well, I mean, all of us were sort of hit by it at about 10:30 that night, though it had started happening almost 40 minutes earlier. And it was horrific because I think what people are today talking about is the Taj and the Oberoi. But where it actually started with was a working person's railway terminus, the Victoria terminus or the Chhatrapati Shivaji terminus station. And that is where the kind of shootout began. And ironically enough, the only CCTV images we have of the persons who committed the act are from the railway station. The private hotels, the five-star hotels, had not even got CCTVs on. And you had, I think, more than at least 100 people being killed there. And from there, the attackers moved to an adjacent road where there's a public hospital called the Kama Hospital. And they shot there a few people on the streets, and then they moved inside the hospital and threatened a few people, which is when the police contingent of some of our best policemen arrived there, and that is where 3 of them were tragically shot. Now, these policemen had first gone to the Taj, actually, and then gone to the government headquarters at the Mantralaya, which is near Nariman Point, before they were called to this spot. And after that, as we know, just one of the survivors in the policeman's vehicle showed a lot of presence of mind, managed to call the control room, which is finally why one of them is nabbed and alive. Otherwise, we may not have had a single of them alive today. Then, of course, the horror of the next 2.5 days with the television cameras just relentlessly taking the whole incident, hooking us all onto it actually for 2.5 days. And the utter horror of what happened in the Taj, Nariman Bhavan and the Oberoi. And
Teesta,
now the political fallout is what we are seeing today.
Teesta, the reports that as few as 10 gunmen were involved, given the extent of the carnage and the number of sites that were hit, what's your sense of that?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't get you on that. I'm sorry. I
said that the reports that we've gotten here that there were as few as 10 attackers involved in these attacks.
We've had confusing figures.
You're saying these are confusing figures?
Yes, the first day we were told that there were 20 people who came. Now we are told that there are 10. And frankly, I think we need to be able to sit down very, very rationally and put together all the different versions as they come in different points of time. Because what we've had is extensive media reports, 24/7, quoting different official sources. But the official version is what we're looking for, and we started getting that from the second day, largely from the Army and the NSG commanders. But I think there has been some difference of opinion between that and the police, so we just have to wait for the final version to come out.
And could you tell us about the intelligence chief who was killed early on in the fighting? You were very knowledgeable about his activities?
Yeah, actually, he was not the intelligence. He was the anti-terrorism squad chief, a man called Hemant Karkare, who had, in fact, been a lot in the news over the past 3 or 4 months. First, for his, he's known, by the way, to be in one of those rare breed in the Indian police, an extremely honest and straightforward policeman who only answers to the Indian Constitution and not to his political bosses, whichever ideology they come from. And he's been responsible both for the blast investigation of the Ahmedabad blast and thereafter involved in the Maligaon blast investigation. And he had come into very, very vicious attack over the latter from the Hindu right-wing parties who had reduced themselves to very, very pathetic levels of slander against him. So, in fact, the couple of days before he was shot dead, he was, in fact, very, very depressed about this attack from this political quarter.
Professor Prashad, if you could elaborate on what Teesta was just talking about, on the killing of the anti-terrorism police chief, the context. I think people in this country don't understand the conflict between Hindus and Muslims in India, what this means, what the extreme right-wing Hindu party and parties are in India, and also what this means for elections that are just taking place now in India.
You know, there's a broad sociological story that starts in the 1970s. Until the 1970s, parties that identified themselves as religious parties pretty much had very, very low ability to pull people out to vote for them. In the 1970s, when the Indian government shifted its ability to provide social welfare, to provide agricultural credit to the vast bulk of the people, essentially when it broke down the Nehruvian path of social development, at that point, to gain legitimacy, even the Congress party, which was Nehru's party, started to bring in religious forms of mobilization to gain legitimacy, but they were outflanked on the right by the Hindu party, particularly the Bharatiya Janata Party, which in the 1980s took off at an unimaginable pace. It created this family of organizations. In a way, it outsourced its terror to groups such as the Bajrang Dal, and most recently this group that committed perhaps the blast in